Hey everybody, it's John Murray. I'm fishing on the Bass Pro Tour on the Major League Fishing, and we're working with Bass University today to talk about downsizing your topwater lures for certain conditions. And as you can see right now, we're in the fall. We're in a cool time. This is traditionally the time that I will always downsize my baits because the bait's smaller, fish are finicky. But that doesn't mean it's the only time I'm gonna downsize my baits. Anytime you have conditions that the bait is small, the fish are getting pressured, the lakes are getting beat up, sometimes you have to downsize your baits to get some bites. And that's been a theme of mine for 25 years fishing tournaments. I grew up on western lakes that get pretty good pressure, and now I live on eastern lakes like in Tennessee that get a lot of pressure. So I've seen a real dichotomy of how these people fishing can affect your fishing. So I try to stay a step ahead and pay attention. I think paying attention, if you just pay attention to your conditions out there, that's the key anytime you're out bass fishing. The first one we're going to talk about is the walking bait. This is, a walking bait is probably my favorite lure to throw on topwater. This is a river to sea rover. And the beauty of these things is you can throw them a mile and they'll pull those fish up. When I grew up fishing the US Open on Lake Mead, this was the only bait you needed. You could throw it over deep trees and 15, 20 feet, and those fish in that real clear water would come up to a big old lure like that and grab it. And it was just incredible how deep those fish would come to hit a big old walking bait. So that's been a staple of mine. But moving back here, fishing some of these lakes back here, when you start seeing the little tiny shad and you see I'll see a 5 or 6 pound fish come up and eat a little baby shad like that, you're like, they're just not keyed into it. You talk about trout fishing and match the hatch. That's sort of the philosophy that you get to when you're fishing in the fall, where you're trying to match your bait to, the lake you're fishing. So a lot of times I'll downsize. I'll get just a step smaller. This is a little vixen, and it's 2/3 the size, but it downsizes. And even sometimes I'll go with even smaller bait, something even smaller than that. And it's really not, it's my favorite bait. It's what size are the fish, the prey, the bass are eating. One thing I always do is I love to add a little feather trailer when they're chasing little bait, because a lot of times they'll key on that little bait, that little feather, even more than the bait itself. Maybe it's like they see a school up there and this little feather is what they'll key on. So you can use that as just a little option when you're throwing these walking baits. Because normally, most of the walking baits don't come with a feather trailer, but I do like to add that when you're chasing small bait. So yeah, there's not a rule. I don't have a firm rule when I'm going to use each one, other than being observant. How big is the bait swimming around? Do you see, bigger shad, little shad? What are you seeing? Match that size as close as you can. You're going to get the most bites. Now, it's not to say you're going to catch the biggest fish, but I think sometimes the biggest fish will be the ones you catch on the smaller baits because they are so keyed into that little bait at that time of year.